Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, discussing with Ashley Baker. She's the director for the Committee for Justice in Washington, D.C. Ashley, before the break, we were talking about privacy concerns, and we just got into, there's concerns about tech companies and privacy, but also concerns about government data collection and so on. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but it's hard. There are sort of points where the public gets engaged with this and shows their disapproval for their privacy being degraded, and other times where it's the Faustian bargain, like they're willing to trade off their privacy if they can have more convenience with a new tech advancement. Are you noticing the same thing?
Yes, I think this is a cycle we've seen for a number of years too. I mean, going back to just search engines, for example, you get a free product, and in exchange for that, you have to see advertisements. A lot of your data is collected. Of course, it's always a matter of where to draw that line, and at what point is there actual real world harm in a company or a government having access to that data.
Yeah. So, do you do any public policy recommendations on what the right balance is on that?
Yes, so I do think, as I was talking about defining harm, I do think that is kind of a big underlying principle to not lose sight over. Is it someone's shopping patterns, or is it something that's either personal information that might give away your address, or is it something that's defamatory? I think that it's really important in this to decide where exactly this causes harm, instead of looking at this and saying, okay, I don't really like this. I would like to control the data, or I'd like to be able to control what's out there about me in the internet, because then you run into some speech issues as well.
Indeed. So let's talk about. We talked a little bit at the beginning about the regulatory framework that's emerging. So do you see this as mainly coming from government, or is this self-regulation from tech companies? Where do you think it's going on that?
Both. Of course, we have to take it with a grain of salt anytime we say self-regulation by companies. We're generally, what does that mean? But it is in the best interest of the technology to be able to develop to a certain point if they don't overstep certain boundaries. In terms of government regulations, it seems that they're not exactly, lawmakers aren't really sure what they're regulating yet. Are they regulating generative AI? Are they regulating algorithms and decision making? And a lot of the legislative proposals don't really hit the nail on the head in terms of defining exactly what's a covered entity, what the harms are, what the consequences are. A lot of those definitions can be pretty vague, especially this early in the process.
What do you think the chances are of global coordination on this issue?
Through one way or another, yes. I mean, you can see global coordination in the form of trade agreements. You can see actual global coordination in developing a worldwide AI framework, or you could see what we got essentially with GDPR in the European Union, which
Right.
other countries adopted it because once the companies had to apply with that stricter set of guidelines, and they might as well apply it across the board, and that became kind of the de facto regulation in a lot of places outside of Europe. So I think those are the three options that are on the table there.
And I noticed that the United Kingdom Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is trying to create in the UK a center for AI governance, if, for lack of a better terminology, perhaps, trying to bring President Biden in on it and make the UK the center of this thought. Have you been tracking that as well?
I've been tracking that a little bit. There are some parallel proposals in the US, and they kind of range from starting kind of, a center project within an existing regulatory agency, or there are some proposals on the table that would just create an entirely new regulatory agency for artificial intelligence. And I do think what's different about regulating this technology, though, is each use case is already regulated by different
Right.
regulators. Like, let's say its application in financial services, that would be in the United States regulated by the SEC or a number of other financial regulators. Privacy would be regulated usually by the FTC or by statute by Congress. So it's like there are all these moving pieces, but it's not that AI itself is something that's necessarily one regulation, one size fits all. But in terms of these broader centers to kind of study what needs to be done, I think in general that's a good idea.
Right, right. And I noticed that the U.S. Congress, I mean, they've been having congressional hearings, right, on this kind of thing. So they're
Yes.
sort of getting to the point where there might be some attempts at legislation. Is that what you're seeing as well?
I think so. Although in the United States, I would point out we do have a divided Congress with one chamber
Right,
belonging to, each party, and relying on Congress really to pass legislation at the end of the day, they tend to, that's a little bit of a rarity.
right,
And
right,
even rarer with the technology issues that things might, not have some unintended consequences. But I do think
right.
that this conversation is productive.
We're going to take another break, though. We'll be back with our guest, Ashley Baker, after this break. Please stay with us.